CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Polly Middlehurst. Our top stories today. From military control to political control, the Taliban's co-founder arrives in Kabul to try to set up a new government. Also today, refugee camps in Spain and border fences in Greece. Europe prepares for a flood of Afghan migrants. A helping hand from Angela Merkel. Germany's Chancellor weighs in to rally her party behind her would-be successor. And Biden names his choice. The US president nominates a veteran diplomat to become his country's ambassador to China. Our main story today, the Taliban's co-founder is in Kabul right now to start outlining how the group plans to govern Afghanistan, less than a week after its rapid takeover of the capital. An official says former Afghan government leaders will be brought in to help with a new framework expected in the next few weeks. And this as the security situation around the airport in Kabul intensifies, with thousands of people still desperately trying to get out of the country. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Zamari Al-Abbasin in Kabul. First of all, tell us about this co-founder of the Taliban. What sort of vision do you think he has for a future government under the Taliban in Afghanistan?
Hello, Polly, and good evening. The situation and political stage is accelerating, and the efforts towards an exclusive government that the Taliban have been talking for a long time. When Taliban US started talks, and they were emphasizing all these things and were saying they agree with an exclusive government in Afghanistan. But there are elements and some parties inside that are still in opposition with Taliban ideologically and according to the divisions in Afghanistan for a long history. So Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, the co-founder of Taliban, is finally here in Kabul after arriving to Kandahar several days ago, and he will be meeting several other leaders of Afghanistan political parties, and as I got reports, is already engaged in talks with former President Hamid Karzai, Dr. Abdullah Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. But most of these talks and negotiations are off the record. That's why the media in Afghanistan still cannot reach what's in details and what's on table. But the Taliban have been emphasizing on the inclusive government. What is their definition for this new Islamic State, which is now very shortened, and it's called an inclusive government? Yet the Taliban ideology, it's too soon and too early to talk about what they really mean when they say inclusive government. But they say they have no enmity with anybody, any party, so they could join Afghanistan political stage, and they emphasize and stress on the issues to work together for a better Afghanistan. We have been waiting that what would be the result of meetings that have been taking place in Kabul right now in different places. We will wait, and we will get the points that what's been happening to the points possible.
Zamari Al-Abbasin, thanks very much indeed. Well, a Taliban commander in Kabul has told CGTN that the new leadership will bring security to Afghanistan. This as reports emerge of violence by the group against minorities in other parts of the country. The Taliban itself says its fighters will continue to demonstrate restraint.
We have a united team. The team has been committed to bring further security and peace to our countrymen. We have so far not seen any major security incident across the country. We have also arrested a group of robbers in Kabul, those who were attempting to loot people's property. We are waiting for our leadership to announce the next new Islamic government. This is not Ashraf Ghani administration, but a government that will not allow chaos in Kabul. as you have seen in the way we have done things in the past days. My team and I didn't sleep for 2 nights just to secure the people of Kabul. As you see, we are monitoring the city's security, and the situation would hopefully get better soon. We are also holding meetings with media outlets, directors, to inform them about the situation in the country. We assure the people of Kabul of their safety and protection.
Well, meanwhile, thousands of Afghans fleeing Taliban rule are flocking to the Pakistani border, seeking to pass through there. Our correspondent Daniel Khan visited the border town of Torkham and filed this report.
I've just arrived at Torkham, Pak-Afghan border, and the situation here seems relatively calm compared to a few weeks ago. I can see a smooth movement of cargo shipping containers carrying goods to and from Pakistan into Afghanistan. Only 2 weeks ago, there was mounting tension as traders on both sides had fears that the trade would stop. But after the Taliban took control of the border facility on the other side, there has been peace. I can also see people crossing the border, but only those who are carrying valid visas, Afghan identification documents, or a refugee card. Officials here say that apart from the usual movement, they haven't seen a new influx of refugees so far, but they are prepared if and when it happens. Meanwhile, security on the Pakistani side has been beefed up to keep a check on suspicious activity. Daniel Khan, CGTN, Torkham, Pak-Afghan border.
Well, Europe's bracing itself now for an increase in refugees and asylum seekers from Afghanistan as people continue to flee the Taliban's takeover in the country. Greece and Turkey have put up yet more barriers along their borders to try to stem the flow of would-be migrants. Yolo Abdafid has this report.
Starting a new life, these Afghans were met at a military airfield outside Madrid. Almost 150, including children, are in the first wave to be evacuated from the Afghan capital. The Spanish authorities are preparing for more. This camp could house 1,000. A field of tents waiting for a new generation of refugees, which earlier attracted some senior politicians who came to see the facilities for themselves.
Spanish hub, this European hub, organized to provide support and any help to our Afghan collaborators and refugees, represents the values and principles of the European Union.
In the UK, British Afghans are also trying to help their fellow nationals, many of whom are trying to escape what they fear will be persecution under Taliban control, especially those employed by or who had relatives working for the government or as interpreters for NATO forces.
We are trying here to do advocacy and lobbying on behalf of you in the UK as well as in the Western society.
New barriers are built along Turkey's border with Iran as well as the Greek border in western Turkey. Greek ministers were shown what they say is a new 40-kilometre fence and a surveillance system. The government's concerned that instability in Afghanistan will lead to an increase in migrants. In 2015, conflict in Syria brought almost 1 million migrants to Europe.
The Afghan crisis is creating new facts in the geopolitical sphere, and at the same time it's likely to create more migrants. We're a European country working inside the European Union, and decisions are made within this framework, but we can't wait passively for any possible impact.
Migration into Greece, Spain and Italy especially hasn't stopped. Arrivals in Greece have slowed significantly since 2016, when the EU agreed a deal with Turkey to stop people crossing the border in exchange for financial support. Because of that, 3.5 million Syrian refugees have remained in Turkey. But thousands in Afghanistan seem desperate to leave. Kabul's main airport is inundated as Afghans hope to be allowed to fly out. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN.
Well, here in the UK, there have been protests in a show of solidarity with the people of Afghanistan. The protesters are calling on the government to take in many more than the 20,000 refugees it has pledged. The demonstrations also come after a government controversy. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says he absolutely has full confidence in his Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, over his decision not to call Afghan ministers to make arrangements to evacuate translators as the Taliban's takeover was unfolding. Well, as you saw in that last report, Afghans in the UK are watching events back home very closely. Many are worried about what's in store for a country that's seen several decades of conflict and has one of the world's largest refugee populations. Nawi Jabaka reports now from London.
Like millions of Afghans, Qari Abdul Wakil fled war in Afghanistan. Leaving in 1991, he ended up in London in 1996. A quarter of a century later, he's now a leading member of the Afghan community here.
The current situation in Afghanistan is really painful for all Afghans, wherever in the world they live. This conflict has been dangerous for so long, but these recent events have really worried and saddened everyone.
Qari Wakil's family escaped the Afghan civil war shortly after the Soviets left the country. This time around, it's the return of the Taliban that's causing concern among younger generations too, many of whom were born abroad.
It's been 40 years we've been hoping. We will keep hoping for our country. It's our beloved Afghanistan and we love it. It's our country. We must have hope for it.
Like many immigrant communities, Afghans here in London have largely ended up in a few areas of the city, such as here in Neasden, where there are numerous Afghan shops and restaurants serving up a reminder of life back home. Talking to people here in recent days, one thing they share is a real sense of concern, watching events unfold, wondering about the safety of family members back home, and after more than 4 decades of war, asking when the violence will end.
In his shop in West London, Tawab Khan is thousands of miles away from his native Kandahar, but he's surrounded by reminders of the life he left behind, providing others with the likes of Afghan rice and dried fruits.
The Americans came, and in the 20 years there was a little bit of progress. Now Western countries have left, and they've left Afghans on their own again.
That people are willing to jump from planes and their bodies fall on the floor. This is very painful for us, honestly. Okay, we live in this country, this is our second home, but we haven't come here from happiness. We've come because of the cruelty of war. We request from all the international community that if you really love the humans on this earth, please help this country. Until when should people die there?
It's a question that many Afghans are continuing to ask. Nawi Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Well, later on this hour, my colleague Stephen Cole will be here with his programme, The Agenda. And in this week's show, he's going to be examining just what effect events in Afghanistan will have on Western military and political policy. Is it a time for a change of tactics? That's The Agenda with Stephen Cole, right after The World Today, 16:30 GMT, right here at CGTN. Still ahead on The World Today. A journey, but without a destination. A ship sets out on a cruise from Hong Kong to go nowhere.
the EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
Coming up on Razor, the long trek home. After captivating the world with a record-breaking 1,300-kilometre journey across China, this herd of Asian elephants is finally heading back to their reserve.
Actually, they're already reaching to the place with a similar vegetation type and similar climate, so which is good.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories today on CGTN. From military control to political control, the Taliban's co-founder arrives in Kabul in Afghanistan to set up a new government. Meanwhile, refugee camps in Spain and border fences in Greece, Europe, braces itself for a flood of Afghan migrants. Angela Merkel says she's deeply convinced by her party's candidate, Armin Laschet, as her successor for Chancellor. Merkel made the comments to CDU party supporters as it kicked off its campaign ahead of next month's election, after which she'll stand down. Her endorsement could boost Laschet's poor ratings and ease fears their party may crash out of government.
In all these years, I have known Armin as a person and a politician for whom the C in our party's name is not just any letter, but the compass for everything he has done and is doing.
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has announced plans to nominate a new ambassador to China. Veteran diplomat Nicholas Burns is tapped to represent Washington in Beijing. CGTN's Nathan King looks into Burns' career and the challenges he might face in his new post if he's confirmed by the US Senate.
Nicholas Burns has been a visible figure on China, often appearing on CGTN and other global networks to weigh in on the most important bilateral relationship in the world.
All the transnational issues, pandemics, we can't do much without China. I think that balancing these two imperatives is going to be vital. It's complicated. We can't see them as the enemy because we need them.
Burns' emphasis has been on the cooperation possible between Washington and Beijing on the most pressing global issues. In the Biden administration, he will also have to focus on competition and confrontation with China too. Burns will have to work alongside a high-profile team focused on China and defer to the National Security Council's so-called Asia czar, Kurt Campbell, and US Trade Representative Catherine Tai, and of course work with an intensely hawkish US Congress when it comes to China. Burns' selection as an ambassador would be a big win for diplomats over politicians. Burns has decades of experience as a diplomat in Africa, an expert on Russia, an ambassador to Greece and NATO. He was also the State Department spokesman and served on the National Security Council. Of course, Nicholas Burns was not the only candidate under consideration for the Beijing post. Charlene Barshevsky, the former trade representative who famously negotiated with Beijing over China's admission to the World Trade Organization, was widely reported to be in the running. But for that reason alone, her appointment would have been difficult due to the current anti-free trade climate in US politics. Nicholas Burns is a known quantity here in Washington, and it's unlikely that he will face any obstacles during his confirmation in the US Senate. And in Beijing, he's known as a safe pair of hands and an honest negotiator. But that necessarily won't be enough to warm relations between the US and China. As you know, relations probably haven't been this bad in the last 40 years. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
Ismail Sabri Yaakob has been sworn in as Malaysia's new Prime Minister. He replaces Muhyiddin Yassin, who resigned on Monday after less than 18 months in office. Infighting in his coalition cost him majority support. Yaakob takes the helm amid a slumping economy and a worsening pandemic. Thousands of protesters have marched through Paris against a contested bill that extends the use of health passes to restaurants, bars, trains and planes. It's the 6th consecutive day of demonstrations against the pass, which protesters say infringes their civil and personal liberties. The government hopes the pass will avoid a return to harsher restrictions, including lockdowns and curfews. Meanwhile, hundreds of anti-lockdown protesters have been arrested in Australia after violence erupted between demonstrators and police. It came as the country recorded its sharpest rise in the daily COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began, with 825 new infections. Lockdowns in Sydney and Melbourne have been extended until at least September to try to stop the surge of the Delta variant. And India has approved the world's first DNA coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. It's been developed by Zydus Cadila and is India's second homegrown jab. It uses a section of genetic material from the virus to trigger a person's immune system, to produce antibodies and to teach itself to fight off the virus. And Hurricane Grace has battered eastern Mexico with torrential rain and howling winds after becoming one of the most powerful storms in years to hit the country's Gulf Coast. Grace was carrying top winds of 200 kilometres an hour when it slammed into the coast on Saturday. Forecasters are warning of storm surges now and flash flooding across the country. The giant container ship that blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days earlier this year has returned to the waterway and successfully crossed it. The Ever Given was escorted through its journey throughout the canal en route from the UK to China. A vessel which jammed in March during high winds, halting traffic and disrupting global trade has continued on its way. So Hong Kong then has launched its first so-called cruise to nowhere. The Genting Dream, as it's called, sails out without stopping at any particular port. And to keep the virus at bay, each indoor room, including the cabins, has its own independent ventilation system. And Chung explains.
All aboard the Genting Dream, Hong Kong's first ever cruise to nowhere. For this trip, it will sail for 3 days and 2 nights without stopping at any ports of call to minimize COVID-19 outbreaks. But that isn't the only health measure.
Here at the check-in point, everyone has already gone through mandatory temperature screening. It's not that crowded because guests have already checked in online, and they're given designated arrival times to minimize crowd congestion. All they have to do now is print their check-in confirmation over there, hand in their health declaration, and they're in.
All passengers and crew must also be fully vaccinated and tested for the virus before departure. Operating at half capacity, this ship has about 1,500 passengers and an increased crew size of about 1,100 people on board.
I'm so happy to finally travel again.
I'm excited. It's so big here. I came here with my family and friends to relax.
For contact tracing purposes, all passengers must carry a tracking device wherever they go, so this encourages social distancing. Indoor air circulation is also different from conventional methods. For example,
every cabin like the one I'm in has a 100% fresh air ventilation system. That means incoming fresh air gets filtered into the room from that vent, and it gets redirected out of the ship through another vent in the bathroom to avoid air recirculation between cabins.
Meanwhile, isolated wards in the medical center and cabins can be converted into quarantine rooms if required.
I'm not scared. I've been vaccinated and tested. If I still get infected, I can only say I'm unlucky.
With 19 decks and weighing over 150,000 tons, the ship has a wide range of outdoor attractions to offer, including this ropes course I'm in, which has a 35-meter zip line right above me.
There's also rock climbing, outdoor yoga, and a water slide park with 6 different slides. There's a slide for everyone, but those seeking adrenaline would probably go for the blue or pink one. Otherwise, retail therapy is available for those looking to spend, while there are 20 restaurants and bars for others to have their fill.
Actually, for the summer holiday, it has been a robust month for us. The traditional low season is after school holiday in September and October, but we see a very good pickup in the low season as well.
The city's cruises have been suspended since last February, and Genting Cruise Lines is currently the only operator of such a voyage. The government has called this a good start for the city's struggling tourism sector and called it a step forward in bringing back normality to society. Ann Cheng, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Well, the COVID crisis has also triggered a boom in online shopping, putting many more delivery vans on cities' streets. Well, now the British government is looking for more environmentally friendly alternatives by promoting the use of electric bicycles to deliver our goods. Michael Voss reports.
Every morning, this London-based transport startup prepares for the day's deliveries. But the boxes are loaded onto bicycles rather than vans. The company has a fleet of specially adapted electric cargo bikes able to carry up to 300 kilos of goods. They believe it's a cost-effective alternative for smaller loads over shorter distances in busy urban areas.
It's not really how do we compete with vans, it's how do vans compete with us. We are smaller for carrying the same payload. We are faster because we bypass traffic. And by virtue of being a bicycle, we are cleaner.
Riders travel up to 100 kilometres a day around London and can use bike and bus lanes as well as moving around backed-up traffic.
I feel very safe. Prior to me starting, I have the 2 weeks training. They really make sure that you are comfortable on the road, knowing how to filter, overtake traffic, checking behind you, ringing your bell. I feel super safe.
All the extra vans needed to deliver online shopping are added to both congestion and pollution. Companies providing takeaway meals by bicycle are a common sight. Now, a new study on e-cargo bikes, commissioned by the climate action charity Possible, suggests that in urban environments they can outperform vans.
We commissioned this report because we know that transforming our cities is going to take lots of different initiatives, lots of exciting new things, and we thought we had an inkling that cargo bikes might be an important key in achieving that. And we were really, really excited and surprised by the results.
Researchers spent 3 months timing and tracking this company's fleet of cargo bikes on GPS and comparing them to similar van routes. They found that bikes were 60% faster and dropped off more parcels per hour than vans, with 90% less carbon emissions than diesels.
The British government is also keen to promote the use of cargo bikes and has committed some $3 million in grants to encourage local authorities and businesses to buy them.
So far, some 18 towns and cities around the country are using e-cargo bikes bought under the scheme. Pedal power has long been a cheap transport of necessity in the developing world. Now it's starting to catch on over here. Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
And the main headline once again, the Taliban's co-founder is in Kabul to set up a new government in Afghanistan, less than a week after its rapid takeover of the capital. An official says former Afghan government leaders will be brought in to help, with a new framework expected in the next few weeks. And that's just about it from The World Today. Thank you very much for watching. From all the team in London, goodbye. The agenda is next.